Hi everyone, I'm here with a journal page I created based on the tag challenge over on my Art Journal Techniques Facebook group. So at the moment I took an old recipe book that I recently bought for probably 10 cents, and I tend to remove pages because we're going to be adding texture and all sorts of goodies on the pages, so it needs to be thinner before you start. So here what I do is I wet a paintbrush and go over where the stitching is with the water and soften the page so that when you remove it, it doesn't put too much stress on the stitching. Now sometimes doing this it will leave bits of paper behind, so I just take a pair of tweezers and remove it. So that's all I'm doing. I think I end up taking about 16 double pages out of the book. And I thought I'd just use this book as a journal for the journal pages based on the tag challenges. I can't remember. I think there's about 30 double pages or 31 double pages remaining in the book once I've finished removing all the pages. And I'll probably try and do something with the pages that I've removed. Make another journal maybe. So here, because the stitching is looser, because I've removed so many pages, I'm applying some masking tape over the gutter section there. And it does a couple of things. It strengthens the joining of the pages, and it also reduces seepage from your inks, sprays and all that sort of goodness when you're creating a page. So I end up applying this masking tape to the whole book. Now you can see here that it has made the spine a bit bulky. Now if by the end of the journal, once I've completed it all, it's way too bulky, I could probably remove the spine and just add a larger spine to it if I wanted to. So now I've done all that, I'm ready to gesso and start playing. And the tag that I created for the challenge, tag number 1, there's photos on my Facebook page. I used greens, shades of green, but I thought today I would use a colour that I don't tend to use regularly, very much at all actually, and that's purple. So I'm just taking some deep purple here. Now on the tag I applied the paint with my fingers and it blends a lot better that way. But here, because it was so big, I wasn't going to sit there for ages just using my fingers to blend all the paint in, so I'm just using a paintbrush at the moment. Now this craft paint there was a cheap paint, Delta Ceramcoat, and it actually went a lot further than the more expensive paints. So it covered up a lot of that deep violet. So I remember that for later on. So this page, based on the tag, the first tag, which was layers. So what I'm doing is creating layers on the journal page. So gesso, then the paint, now a script stamp. And now some scraps of paper. So this is just a file folder that I have sitting next to me on top of a chest of drawers. and in it I put any excess paper bits, scraps, deli prints, all sorts of goodies in there, and I just refer to it every now and again when when I want to put some texture on a page, grab some out, rip them up and stick them down. And I'm using gel medium here because it's the thickest medium I can use, that I have to use when I'm applying heavier paper pieces to pages. Like that tissue wrap, I would normally just use a fluid matte medium because that's all it needs. But because I was using the gel medium, I just went ahead and used it on everything. So that's another layer done. So if we don't count the gesso, we've got paint and then paper. So that's 2 layers. Not too many layers in this one. Should have worked more on that. So the next layer, I'm stenciling, and I'm applying some white gesso over the Mini Mod Spirals Crafters Workshop stencil. And I'm going all over the page with this. I don't know that I did on the tag, but that's okay. That's the beauty of the tag challenge. Take what you did on the tag and incorporate it into a journal page, but mix it up. Okay, so that was layer 3. Now, layer 4 is more paint. And this is a spouncer. It's a massive one that I bought while I was over in the States. And it's a great way to add paint without the brush strokes. Although it's like a hard plastic or a very thin metal, it's a funny texture, and it creates lines like scratches when you apply it. But that's okay, it all adds to the texture. So what was this, layer 4? Yeah, so I'm just reapplying the same colours that I used on the first layer. So now it's become a bit darker. What's this, layer 5? So more stenciling, this time over the Cherry Blossoms Crafters Workshop stencil. And I at first go over with the light blue, violet, I can't remember what it was called. And then I just add some of that pale lilac over the blossom areas. So what I did between takes then was cleaned the stencil and then turned it over, so I basically reversed it and doing sponging over on the right hand page. So it's sort of mirrored reversed. And that looks pretty as is, and then I go and add more stuff and probably made it look, it got lost. That look got lost, I think. So I just applied some iridescent medium to one of the purple shades. And I did that because I think I used some PBO Diner paint on the tag, which gave it a bit of shimmer. And I didn't have any in the purple shade, so that's why I used the iridescent medium. And so I'm just stenciling over the Stencil Vines stencil with that. Now when using the iridescent medium, the more you use, the more transparent it becomes. So I probably did a third of the iridescent medium to the paint, a third to one. Was that layer 6? Yeah, so basically only 6 layers and before I now apply the focal images. So I wanted to use, so this is a Deco Art Americana stencil set. There are two in there, and I didn't want the fairy on this one. I wanted the other fairy, but I wanted the mushrooms from this one. Now the mushrooms were too tall for the page and for the other fairy. So what I did was trace the mushrooms, moved the smaller ones up, and made a stencil out of it. So there's that larger fairy. And what I wanted to try and do is put a bottom, put her sitting on one of the mushrooms and her foot leaning on another mushroom. So that's why I had to bring as well the the smaller mushrooms up higher. So there I'm trying to see how it's going to sit on the page, making it work. So I'm taking some Mars Black and sponging that on over that made up mushroom stencil. Because if you remember, I've often said that when you've got a great, well, a background that you like, um, adding black or white, depending on the tone of or the brightness of the page, either black or white or both, really makes the page pop. So I was just touching up some areas there with the paintbrush. So I'm just mixing some of the violet with the Mars Black, just to give it a purple shade. Very subtle. And now I need to mask off the stencil because I didn't want the butterfly or the fairy sprinkles on the page. I just wanted the fairy. And now sponging that, aha, yeah, I didn't want it to go over the wings. I've got something else in mind for the wings. So just sponging it over on the fairy. Yeah, she worked out not too bad. So now I didn't have a stencil of a tree that was the size I needed. So I had to try and draw one. It's alright. It is what it is. That'll do it. And now I wanted a couple of birds on the branch. Why? I don't know, just for a bit of extra interest in the page. But then I think that helped with determining what the quote was, because I hadn't had a quote in mind at this stage. And now I'm just rubbing an embossing pillow over the page to reduce any embossing powder sticking to areas I don't want. So masking off the stencil so that I just have the wings, and I'm going to apply some clear Versamark embossing ink over those wings on the stencil, just using the Versamark ink pad. I could have used the Ranger Emboss It Dabber, but I find with that it can seep underneath the stencil and make an awful mess. So now I'm putting on some gold tinsel embossing powder by Ranger. Yeah, I just noticed there that the wings don't actually sit on the fairy, so they're sort of off in La La Land. So I end up fixing that in a minute. Just cooling it down and grabbing my clear embossing pen and just lengthening those wings, touching the body so that they are part of her. There we go, and that fixed that. And now I thought I needed a bit more gold on the page. And all I wanted to do was the quote, so I decided to write it with the clear embossing pen and go over it with some gold tinsel embossing powder. I probably should have just used plain gold because you really have to look close at the writing to see what the quote is. I don't know yet whether I'm going to glue these, like glue two pages together in this album or not. They're fairly heavy. We'll see. And now I thought, after that, because the quote says I like to be alone, but I hate to be lonely, because she looks a bit sad there and pensive looking. I thought it needed a bit more black, a bit more evening out. So I just took the Dyan Reaveley journal block and drew with a black PITT artist brush pen and now painting it in with some Mars black. And then that finishes the page. So first challenge done. Thanks so much for watching, and please, if you want to join in, head on over to my Art Journal Techniques Facebook page. I'll leave a link in the description box below. Bye.